Angry woman sued single dad veteran for saving her. Her husband paid him millions. She tried to destroy the man who dragged her from death itself, but when the truth came out, her own husband's revenge turned the courtroom into a miracle no one saw coming. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The late afternoon sun struggled behind thick storm clouds as Jack Turner wiped sweat from his forehead. He surveyed the newly repaired fence surrounding Pastor Ruth's church, satisfaction warming his tired muscles. The old wooden boards had needed fixing for weeks, and he was glad to help, even if his back protested after hours of work. Thunder rumbled in the distance as Jack packed his tools into his weathered pickup truck. The smell of rain hung heavy in the air, and he knew he needed to hurry if he wanted to pick up Mia before the storm hit. His daughter would be waiting at Maple Hollow Elementary, probably watching the clouds with that thoughtful look she got whenever weather turned dramatic. The first fat drops splashed against his windshield as Jack pulled into the school parking lot. There she was, perched on the front steps, her purple backpack clutched tight against her chest. Her face lit up when she spotted his truck, and she ran through the sprinkles, pigtails bouncing. "Daddy!" Mia climbed in, bringing the sweet smell of crayons and chalk dust with her. "Did you see the clouds? Mrs. Peterson says we might get a big storm." "That we might, sweetheart." Jack smiled, reaching over to help her buckle up. "How was school today?" "Good. I got an A on my writing assignment about heroes." She beamed at him. "I wrote about soldiers like you." Jack's throat tightened as he pulled out of the parking lot. "That's my girl." They took the back roads home, their usual route winding past Willow Creek and through stands of maple trees. The rain picked up, drumming steadily on the roof. Lightning flashed, and Mia counted. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3. Thunder crashed, and she giggled. "It's getting closer." "Sure is." Jack switched on the wipers to their highest setting. The rain was really coming down now, sheets of water making the road ahead harder to see. "Remember when we used to watch storms with Mama?" Mia's voice grew quiet, thoughtful. Jack's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I do, baby." She loved a good thunderstorm. She said they were nature's light show. Mia pressed her nose against the window, watching water cascade down the glass. The truck's headlights caught the metal guardrail of the bridge over Willow Creek. Jack slowed, squinting through the downpour. Something wasn't right. The creek had risen dramatically, muddy water churning just a few feet below the bridge's surface. That's when he saw it. A silver SUV, half submerged in the rushing water, its headlights still glowing weakly through the murk. A woman's face appeared in the driver's window, pale with terror, her hands beating against the glass. "Oh my God!" Jack breathed. He pulled over, throwing the truck into park. "Mia, stay here. Do not get out of this truck, understand?" She nodded, eyes wide. "Daddy, I mean it, Mia. Stay put." He grabbed his jacket from behind the seat and was out in the rain before she could protest. The creek's current had grown vicious, brown water swirling around the SUV's doors. The woman inside was screaming now, though he could barely hear her over the storm. Jack waded in, gasping as the cold water hit his chest. The current tried to knock him off his feet, but years of military training had taught him how to stay grounded. He reached the driver's side window, meeting the woman's terrified eyes. "Ma'am, can you unlock the door?" She shook her head frantically, pointing at the door handle. The electronic locks must have shorted out. Water was seeping in fast, already past her knees. Jack looked around desperately, then spotted a piece of broken tree branch floating nearby. He grabbed it, shouting, "Cover your face!" The woman ducked down as he smashed the branch against the window. It took 3 hits before the safety glass finally shattered. Water rushed in faster now, and the woman screamed again. "Take my hand!" Jack reached through the broken window. She grabbed hold, her grip surprisingly strong. With one powerful pull, he hauled her through the window just as the SUV shifted ominously in the current. They stumbled through the water together, fighting against the flow that tried to sweep them downstream. The woman was sobbing, clinging to his shirt. Finally, they reached the bank, where emergency lights were already flashing. Someone must have called 911. Paramedics rushed forward with blankets. The woman! He could see now she was elegantly dressed. though her expensive clothes were soaked through, collapsed into their care, still shaking. Jack stood in the rain, watching as the creek rose higher, swallowing what was left of the silver SUV. The vehicle disappeared beneath the muddy surface with a final gurgle, taking with it any trace of what had just happened. Small fingers slipped into his hand. He looked down to find Mia beside him, holding his army jacket. She must have gotten out of the truck despite his orders, but he couldn't find it in himself to scold her. "Daddy," she whispered, wrapping the jacket around his shoulders. "You're a hero." Jack pulled her close, his heart still pounding from the rescue. They stood there together as the rain continued to fall, watching ambulance lights paint the storm clouds red and blue. In the distance, more sirens wailed, but Jack barely heard them. He was too focused on his daughter's warm presence and the reminder that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply be there when someone needs help. Without a word, they walked back to the truck, their shoes squelching with creek water. As Jack helped Mia into her seat, he noticed her, watching the paramedics load the woman into the ambulance. The drive home was quiet, broken only by the steady thrum of rain on the roof and the fading echoes of emergency sirens. Jack's clothes dripped onto the seat, but he barely noticed. His mind was already turning to practical matters: a hot shower, dry clothes, and maybe some hot chocolate for Mia to chase away the chill of the evening's excitement. Morning sunlight sparkled across puddles dotting the Turners' driveway, nature's reminder of last night's fury. Inside their modest kitchen, Jack Turner stood at the stove, expertly flipping golden pancakes, while his daughter Mia sat at their worn oak table, her math homework spread before her. The morning news played quietly on their small television, more background noise than entertainment, until a familiar scene caught Jack's attention. Aerial footage showed the bridge where he'd made the rescue, yellow emergency tape still fluttering in the breeze. An unidentified Army veteran became a hero last night, the reporter announced, her voice bright with admiration. During yesterday's devastating storm, this Good Samaritan rescued a woman trapped in her vehicle near Willow Creek Bridge. Jack reached for the remote, clicking to a cartoon channel before Mia could look up. His daughter grinned at him, syrup already sticky on her chin. "That's you they're talking about, Daddy." "Looks like these pancakes need eating," he deflected, sliding two more onto her plate. The familiar warmth of her smile was all the recognition he needed. After dropping Mia at school, Jack drove his old pickup through town, assessing the storm's damage. Fallen branches, littered yards, and debris clogged drainage ditches. Without hesitation, he stopped to help Mrs. Peterson clear a tree limb from her driveway, then joined Mr. Collins in sweeping mud from his flooded garage. Meanwhile, at Memorial Hospital, Evelyn Grant's eyes fluttered open to sterile white walls and the steady beep of monitors. Her head throbbed, and purple bruises mottled her arms. As awareness crept back, her hand instinctively went to her bare wrist. "My watch," she croaked, her voice rough. "Where's my watch?" A kindly nurse adjusted her IV drip. "Try to stay calm, Mrs. Grant. You've been through quite an ordeal." "My purse," Evelyn insisted, struggling to sit up. "It was a Gucci. Where are my things?" The nurse's smile faltered slightly. "I'm sorry, but we didn't receive any personal items with you last night. You're lucky to be alive, though. That veteran who pulled you out." "Veteran?" Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "What veteran?" "The man who rescued you. He broke your car window." "And he broke into my car?" Evelyn's voice rose sharply. "Did anyone see what he did after that? My watch was worth thousands. My purse had everything in it." Word spread through the hospital corridors, seeping into the small town's gossip stream like creek water through soil. At the diner, whispers passed between coffee cups. At the hardware store, where Jack bought supplies to help with storm repairs, suspicious glances followed him down the aisles. Heard that Grant woman's stuff went missing. Someone muttered just loud enough for him to hear. "Shame when you can't trust a hero," came another whisper. Jack kept his head high, focusing on the day's work. He helped the Matthews family patch their leaking roof, cleared fallen branches from old Mrs. Wilson's yard, and fixed 3 different flood-damaged fences. His actions spoke louder than rumors, just as they always had. The sun was setting when the knock came at his door. Jack had just finished helping Mia with her spelling homework. The peaceful evening routine, a balm after the long day of sideways glances and whispered accusations. Sheriff Donnelly stood on the porch, his weather-worn face grave beneath his badge. "Evening, Jack. Mind if I ask you a few questions?" Mia appeared in the hallway, her small hand slipping into her father's. Jack squeezed it gently, drawing strength from her presence. "Of course, Sheriff. What's this about?" "Mrs. Grant reported some items missing after last night's incident." Donnelly pulled out his notebook. Specifically, a diamond watch. Swiss-made. Family heirloom, according to her statement. "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" Jack met the sheriff's gaze steadily. "No, sir. I saw no watch. I was focused on getting her out before that car went under. And her purse? Designer brand, she says." "Sheriff?" Jack's voice remained calm, though Mia's grip tightened. "I pulled Mrs. Grant out through the window. That's all." The current was strong, and the car sank almost immediately after. Donnelly studied him, years of law enforcement experience weighing Jack's words. "You understand I had to ask, Mrs. Grant's quite insistent." "I understand." Jack felt Mia press against his side, her presence both comfort and reminder of everything he stood for. "But I give you my word. I saw no watch, took no purse. I just couldn't let her drown." The sheriff nodded slowly, tucking his notebook away. "Appreciate your time, Jack. You have a good evening." He tipped his hat to Mia before turning to leave, but the damage was done. Trust, once questioned, leaves marks invisible, but deep as any storm scars. 2 days after the storm, Maple Hollow buzzed with whispered conversations and sidelong glances. The Morning Glory Diner, usually a warm haven of friendly chatter and fresh coffee, held a different atmosphere today. The usual clinking of cutlery against plates seemed muted, overshadowed by hushed voices and meaningful looks. "Did you hear about that veteran?" Martha Jenkins leaned across her booth toward Betty Williams, her voice barely above a whisper. "The one who pulled Mrs. Grant from her car?" Jack Turner pushed open the diner's door, the little bell above tinkling cheerfully. The conversation stopped. Faces turned away. Old friends suddenly found their coffee. Cups fascinating. He felt the change like a physical weight on his shoulders. These were people he'd known for years, folks whose fences he'd mended, whose cars he'd fixed, whose children played with Mia. Now, they could barely meet his eyes. "Morning, Jack." Sarah, the waitress, managed a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Coffee?" "Just take out today, Sarah. Thanks." His voice was steady, but his hands betrayed him, clenching slightly at his sides. The whispers resumed as he waited for his order. Words like hero and watch floated around him, dripping with doubt. By mid-morning, Sheriff Donnelly's patrol car pulled up to the creek where the SUV had gone under. Jack was already there, studying the muddy water that had calmed considerably since that stormy night. "You sure about this, Jack?" The sheriff adjusted his belt, eyeing the cold water skeptically. "Water's still mighty cold. Got to try." Jack pulled off his jacket. "If there's anything down there, we need to find it." The sheriff nodded, respect flickering across his weathered features. "Let me call the dive team." No time for that. Jack was already wading in, the cold water biting at his skin. The current might shift things around more. The muddy creek water closed over his head. Visibility was poor. But Jack had been a strong swimmer since his army days. He moved methodically, sweeping the creek bottom with practiced precision. His lungs burned, but he pressed on, feeling along the underwater branches and debris. Something caught his hand. Fabric. He tugged, fighting against the tangle of branches. When his head broke the surface, he was clutching a designer purse, coated in mud, but largely intact. Sheriff Donnelly helped him onto the bank. A small crowd had gathered, someone holding up a phone, recording. Jack barely noticed them as he carefully opened the waterlogged purse. Inside, they found Evelyn's wallet, her ID cards, and, wrapped in a silk scarf, an expensive, diamond-encrusted watch. The sheriff examined it carefully, then clapped Jack on the shoulder. "Well, that settles that," Donnelly announced, loud enough for the onlookers to hear. "You're cleared, Jack. Never doubted you for a minute." By nightfall, the video of Jack's second dive into the creek had spread across local social media. The footage showed him emerging from the murky water, dripping and determined, the missing items clutched in his hands. Comments poured in praising his integrity, his bravery, his unwavering commitment to doing right. In her hospital room, Evelyn Grant sat propped up against stark white pillows, her tablet computer balanced on her lap. The room was quiet, except for the soft beeping of monitors and her own sharp intake of breath as she watched the video for the third time. There he was, the man who'd saved her life, diving back into dangerous waters just to prove his innocence. She watched his face as he surfaced, saw the relief in his eyes when the watch was found. No triumph, no smugness, just quiet vindication. "Maybe I misjudged him," she whispered to the empty room. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment as she remembered her accusations, her suspicions. The watch seemed so insignificant now, compared to what could have been lost that night. She set the tablet aside, her fingers tracing the bandage on her forehead. The doctors had said she could go home tomorrow. Her first stop, she decided, would be to find Jack Turner and thank him properly. She owed him that much, at least. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Jack Turner's modest farmhouse as a sleek black Mercedes pulled into the gravel driveway. Mia, who had been doing homework at the kitchen table, peered through the window with curious eyes. The car seemed out of place against the weathered barn and rustic fence posts. Evelyn Grant emerged from the vehicle, her designer outfit and perfectly styled hair a stark contrast to the rural setting. She hesitated for a moment, smoothing invisible wrinkles from her silk blouse, before walking up the worn wooden steps to the front porch. When the doorbell chimed, Mia bounded to answer it, her pigtails bouncing. She pulled open the heavy door and stared up at the elegant woman with wide brown eyes. "Hello," Mia said softly. "Can I help you?" Evelyn shifted uncomfortably. "Is your father home?" Jack appeared behind his daughter, wiping his hands on a dish towel. Recognition flickered across his face. "Mrs. Grant," he said evenly. "Please, come in." He gestured toward their living room, where mismatched furniture showed signs of loving wear. A handmade quilt draped over the back of the sofa added warmth to the humble space. "Can we offer you something to drink?" "I'll make sweet tea," Mia volunteered, eager to help. She scampered off to the kitchen before anyone could respond. "Thank you," Evelyn said, perching carefully on the edge of the couch. Her eyes traveled around the room, taking in the details. 3 military medals hung in simple frames on one wall. Beside them, a photograph showed a younger Jack in uniform, his arm around a beautiful woman with Mia's eyes and smile. "My wife, Sarah," Jack said quietly, noting Evelyn's gaze. "She passed 5 years ago." Evelyn's perfectly composed expression wavered. I'm sorry for your loss." Mia returned with a glass of sweet tea, careful not to spill a drop. "Here you go, ma'am. Daddy says good manners matter most when company comes." "Thank you, sweetheart." Evelyn took a sip, then set the glass on a coaster. "Mr. Turner, I came to properly thank you for what you did during the storm. Your actions were—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Very brave." Jack shook his head. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Evelyn said sharply. "They wouldn't have." Her perfectly manicured fingers twisted in her lap. I haven't been myself since." She stopped, her composure cracking slightly. Mia watched the cod, woman with gentle concern, while Jack waited patiently for her to continue. "My brother," Evelyn finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "We lost him last year." "In a storm. Like that night." "He was." She took a shaky breath. "He was trying to help someone, too. The current was too strong. He drowned." Understanding dawned in Jack's eyes. The room fell silent except for the ticking of the old grandfather clock in the corner. "I can't stand it," Evelyn continued, her words coming faster now. "I can't stand the idea of needing rescuing again, of being helpless like that, of someone else risking their life because I couldn't." Her voice broke. Jack leaned forward in his chair, his expression gentle but firm. "Mrs. Grant, needing help doesn't make you weak." Evelyn's head snapped up, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Sometimes," Jack continued softly, "the bravest thing we can do is accept help when we need it. That's something I learned in the army, and again when I lost Sarah. We're not meant to face life's storms alone." Mia reached out and touched Evelyn's hand. "Daddy says it's okay to be scared sometimes." "Even heroes get scared." Evelyn pulled her hand back, quickly composing herself. She stood, smoothing her skirt. "Yes, well, thank you again, Mr. Turner. And you too, Mia, for the tea." As she drove away, her Mercedes gleaming in the late afternoon sun, she noticed Mrs. Jenkins and her friend Betty standing near the general store. They pointed at her car, heads bent together in conversation. Evelyn's jaw tightened, her fingers gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. Later that evening, in the elegant study of her colonial-style home, Evelyn sat in a leather armchair, a glass of red wine in her hand. Sam Grant watched his wife from across the room, concern etched on his kind face. "I saw you went to the Turners today," he said carefully. "I thanked him," Evelyn replied, not meeting her husband's eyes. It was the proper thing to do. Sam moved closer, sitting on the ottoman near her chair. How did it feel, being there? "They live so simply," she said, taking a long sip of wine. "But they seem content." "Maybe the problem isn't him, Evie," Sam said gently, reaching for her hand. "Maybe it's the pain you haven't healed." Evelyn turned away, her silence heavy with bitterness. The ice in her glass clinked as her hand trembled slightly, but she said nothing more. 3 days later, the morning air hung heavy with humidity as Jack sorted through his mail at the kitchen counter. Bills, advertisements, and then his fingers paused on a thick envelope marked "Certified." The return address made his stomach knot. Morgan and Associates, attorneys at law. Jack's weathered hands trembled slightly as he tore open the envelope. The legal document inside was dense with formal language, but certain phrases jumped out like accusations, civil suit, reckless endangerment, emotional distress. His eyes fixed on the names. Evelyn Grant versus Jack Turner. Mia padded into the kitchen in her sock feet, her backpack slung over one shoulder. "Daddy, what's wrong?" Her young voice cracked through his shock. Jack stared at the paper, his mouth dry. Words failed him as he tried to process how saving someone's life had led to this moment. He couldn't find the right way to explain to his 10-year-old daughter that no good deed goes unpunished. The news spread through Maple Hollow like wildfire. At the local diner, coffee cups clattered against saucers as patrons shared their outrage. "Did you hear? She's suing Jack Turner. After he saved her life?" The disbelief was palpable in every conversation. Sarah, the diner's owner, wiped angry tears as she refilled coffee cups. "That man lost his wife, raises that sweet girl alone, and this is what he gets for being a hero?" Her regulars nodded in solemn agreement. By mid-morning, Pastor Ruth's sensible sedan pulled up to Jack's house. She found him, sitting on his front porch, the lawsuit papers spread across his lap, his face drawn with worry. The older woman settled into the chair beside him, her presence steady and calm. "I've been praying for you since I heard," she said softly, her gray hair catching the morning light. "The whole congregation is in shock." Jack's voice was rough when he finally spoke. "I keep thinking about what I could have done differently. Maybe if I'd waited for emergency services." He trailed off, shaking his head. Pastor Ruth placed her hand on his arm. "Jack Turner, you listen to me. You did exactly what needed to be done. That woman would have drowned if you'd waited." "Then why is this happening?" The pain in his voice was raw. "You can't fight hate with anger," Pastor Ruth reminded him gently. "Sometimes the hardest thing is to respond to hurt with grace." Across town, in the polished offices of Morgan and Associates, Evelyn Grant sat rigid in a leather chair as her lawyer reviewed the paperwork. The man's voice was smooth, reasonable, as he explained their strategy. "Mrs. Grant, this isn't about money," he assured her, sliding the documents across his mahogany desk. "This is about justice for what you're feeling. The trauma you've experienced is real, Evelyn's hand shook as she picked up the pen. Tears slipped down her cheeks, leaving trails through her carefully applied makeup. The lawyer pretended not to notice as she signed her name. "What about his little girl?" Evelyn asked quietly, setting down the pen. "This isn't personal, Mrs. Grant. It's legal procedure." The lawyer's smile didn't reach his eyes as he gathered the papers. That evening, storm clouds gathered again as Jack went through Mia's bedtime routine. He helped her brush her teeth, listened to her prayers, and tucked the quilted blanket around her small frame. Her room was a child's sanctuary, with books stacked on every surface and a small nightlight casting star shapes on the ceiling. Mia's eyes, wise beyond to her years, searched her father's face. "Why would someone hurt you for helping them?" she whispered. Jack sat on the edge of her bed, choosing his words carefully. "Sometimes," he said, "hurt people can't see kindness for what it is." He smoothed her hair back from her forehead, trying to keep his own pain from showing in his voice. Outside, rain began again, pattering against the window panes. The sound reminded Jack of that night at the creek, of the woman screaming in her sinking car, of the cold water rushing around him as he fought to save her. He kissed Mia's forehead and stood up, his shadow tall against her bedroom wall. The raindrops grew heavier, drumming against the roof. In her bed, Mia clutched her stuffed bear closer, watching her father's silhouette in the doorway. Neither of them spoke of the fear that hung in the air between them, as tangible as the storm outside. The morning sun cast long shadows across the courthouse steps as Jack Turner straightened his tie. He'd borrowed it from his neighbor, the same one he'd helped rebuild a fence after the storm. His weathered hands smoothed down the borrowed fabric, a stark contrast to the crisp suits of lawyers rushing past him. "Mr. Turner?" A reporter thrust a microphone toward his face. "Why haven't you hired legal representation?" Jack cleared his throat, uncomfortable with the attention. "Don't need one to tell the truth, ma'am." More reporters gathered, their cameras clicking. The story was too juicy to ignore. Local hero sued by woman he saved. The headline screamed across phones and newspapers, turning his simple act of courage into a media circus. Inside the courthouse lobby, Jack found Pastor Ruth waiting. Her kind eyes crinkled with concern as she approached. "Jack, the community wants to help," she said, touching his arm. "We're organizing a fundraiser for your legal fees. The whole town's behind you." He shook his head. "I appreciate it, Pastor, but—" "No buts," she interrupted, firmly. "Sometimes accepting help is as brave as giving it." Back at Maple Hollow Elementary, Mia sat at her desk, pencil moving across paper with determination. Her teacher, Mrs. Peterson, had assigned a personal essay, and Mia knew exactly what she wanted to write about. "The day my daddy became a hero," she printed carefully at the top of her paper. The words flowed easily as she described the storm, the fear in her heart as she watched her father dive into the rushing water, and the pride she felt seeing him save someone's life. "He didn't think about himself," she wrote. "He just saw someone who needed help and jumped in. That's what heroes do. They don't ask for anything back. They don't wait for thank yous. They just do what's right." Mrs. Peterson read Mia's essay with tears in her eyes. Without telling Mia, she posted it on the school's social media page. Within hours, the essay had thousands of shares. By evening, it had gone viral, touching hearts across the country. At the Grant household, Sam found Evelyn in their home office, staring at her computer screen. Mia's essay filled the monitor, its simple words cutting through layers of pride and pain. "Evie," Sam said softly, placing his hands on her shoulders. "This has gone too far." "I can't back down now," she whispered, but her voice cracked. "You're hurting a good man," he pressed gently. "A single father who risked his life to save yours. Is this really what you want?" Tears spilled down Evelyn's cheeks. "You don't understand. Every time I close my eyes, I'm back in that water, just like Tommy was. Her brother's death still haunted her, raw and unhealed." "Maybe that's exactly why you need to stop this," Sam suggested. "You're not punishing Jack Turner, you're punishing yourself." Evelyn buried her face in her hands, shoulders shaking. But pride, that stubborn, protective pride, kept her from reaching for the phone to call off her lawyers. That evening, Jack sat in his worn armchair, Mia curled in his lap as he read her essay on his phone. His voice grew thick with emotion as he read her words aloud. "My daddy taught me that being brave isn't about not being scared. It's about doing the right thing, even when you are scared. When he jumped into that water, I was terrified I might lose him, like we lost Mommy. But he showed me that love is stronger than fear. That's what makes him my hero, not just that day, but every day." Tears rolled down Jack's cheeks as he hugged his daughter close. "Baby girl, this is beautiful. Are you mad I wrote about you?" Mia asked, looking up at him with worried eyes. "No, sweetheart," he assured her, kissing the top of her head. "I'm proud, so very proud." Later, after tucking Mia into bed, Jack stood in his bedroom. The framed photo of Anna, his late wife, sat on the dresser. Her smile, forever frozen in time, seemed to glow in the soft lamplight. He picked up the frame, thumb brushing across the glass. "You'd be proud of her, Anna," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. "She's got your fire." The house settled into nighttime, quiet around him, but Jack stood there a moment longer, holding his wife's picture. In it, he found the strength to face whatever tomorrow would bring, just as he had that day in the storm-swollen creek, just as he did every day since losing her. Because sometimes, the greatest acts of courage aren't the dramatic rescues, but the quiet moments of carrying on, of choosing hope over bitterness, of teaching your child that doing right matters, even when it costs you everything. The morning sun painted long shadows across Jack Turner's weathered front porch as he stepped outside, coffee mug in hand. He stopped short, nearly spilling the hot liquid. Dozens of envelopes, cards, and covered dishes covered every inch of his steps and railing. A bright yellow post-it note stuck to a ceramic casserole dish caught his eye. "God bless you, Mr. Turner. You're what America needs more of." Jack set his coffee down and picked up one of the envelopes. The return address was from Oregon. Inside, a handwritten letter and a $20 bill fell out. He shook his head, touched but uncomfortable with the attention. "Daddy, look." Mia bounded out onto the porch in her pajamas, eyes wide with wonder. "There's so many. Are they all for us?" Jack smiled softly at his daughter. "Looks like folks want to show their support, sweetheart." As they gathered the items, a news van pulled up across the street. A reporter and cameraman emerged, equipment at the ready. Jack ushered Mia inside, closing the door firmly behind them. "Why don't you help me sort through these while I make breakfast?" he suggested, carrying an armload of casseroles to the kitchen. Throughout the morning, more vehicles arrived. Reporters set up camp along their quiet street, their presence drawing curious neighbors. Jack kept the curtains drawn, focusing instead on reading the heartfelt messages that had arrived from across the country. "Dear Mr. Turner," he read aloud to Mia over pancakes, "my husband is also a veteran. What you did reminds me that true heroes still exist. Stay strong." Mia beamed. "See, Daddy? Everyone knows you did the right thing." Jack's throat tightened. He excused himself to the living room, kneeling beside his worn armchair. "Lord," he whispered, "I never wanted attention. I just did what anyone should have done. Give me strength to handle this with grace. Help me show Mia that doing right matters more than being right." Across town, in her sprawling hilltop mansion, Evelyn Grant paced before a wall of windows. CNN was running the story again. Veteran sued after heroic rescue. Her manicured nails dug into her palms as she watched footage of Jack diving into the creek, over and over. Her laptop chimed with another notification. The comment section under Mia's viral essay had exploded overnight. Evelyn's fingers trembled as she scrolled. What kind of person sues their rescuer? Heartless! This poor veteran and his daughter deserve better. Money can't buy class. Shame on that woman. Each word felt like a physical blow. Anger had driven her to file the lawsuit, but now that fury was crumbling under the weight of thousands of strangers' judgment. She slammed the laptop shut but couldn't escape the quiet voice in her head asking if she'd made a terrible mistake. In his home office downtown, Sam Grant watched his wife's distress from afar. He'd hired Marcus Chen, the city's most discreet private investigator, to analyze every second of available footage from that stormy night. "Show me again," Sam requested, leaning forward in his leather chair. The moment before Jack Turner breaks the window. Marcus zoomed in on the grainy gas station security footage. "See here," he pointed. "Mr. Turner checks the door handles first. When they don't work, he uses his elbow to break the back window away from Mrs. Grant's face. Every move is deliberate, professional, military training in action." Sam nodded slowly. "And the purse?" "Watch this part." Marcus advanced the video. "After getting your wife to safety, he immediately goes back in. No hesitation. The current's stronger now, but he searches until he finds the purse caught on a branch. Everything was there. Nothing missing." Sam rubbed his temples. The evidence was overwhelming. Jack Turner was exactly who he appeared to be. A good man who'd risked everything to save a stranger. That night, Evelyn tossed in their king-sized bed, images from the day swirling in her mind. The medication her doctor prescribed wasn't helping. When sleep finally came, it brought no peace. In her dream, she was back in the SUV. Water rushed in, cold and dark. But this time, it wasn't her brother Thomas's face she saw through the window, disappearing beneath the current. It was Jack Turner's, reaching for her even as the waters pulled him under. She thrashed awake, a sob tearing from her throat. Sam stirred beside her, reaching out. But she was already stumbling to their ensuite bathroom. She gripped the marble counter, staring at her reflection in the dim light as tears streamed down her face. The dream had ripped away her last defenses. In trying to protect herself from the memory of failing to save Thomas, she'd attacked the very person who'd prevented history from repeating itself. The revelation broke something loose inside her, pride giving way to crushing remorse. Her sobs echoed off the bathroom tiles, years of buried grief finally finding release. Outside, a gentle rain began to fall, washing away the last traces of her anger and leaving only the truth she'd been running from. She wasn't really angry at Jack Turner. She was angry at herself, at death, at the helplessness of being human. And now, she'd hurt an innocent man and his little girl, all because she couldn't face her own pain. The farmer's market bustled with Saturday morning energy. Wooden stalls lined Main Street, overflowing with fresh produce and homemade goods. The late summer air carried the sweet scent of ripe peaches and fresh-baked bread. Evelyn Grant moved between the stalls with practiced grace, her designer handbag swinging gently at her side. She'd always preferred the grocery store's pristine aisles, but Sam had insisted the local produce would do her good. She paused at a display of heirloom tomatoes, adjusting her sunglasses to inspect their ripeness. "These ones are the sweetest," a small voice said beside her. Evelyn turned and felt her heart skip. There stood Mia Turner, her brown hair in neat braids, holding a paper bag of apples. The little girl's eyes sparkled with recognition. "You're the lady Daddy saved," Mia said simply. Evelyn's hand trembled slightly on the tomato she held. The child's direct gaze held no judgment, no accusation, just pure, unguarded warmth. For a moment, Evelyn couldn't find her voice. Yes, I am," she finally managed. Mia smiled, revealing a missing front tooth. "Would you like help picking some fruit? Daddy taught me how to find the best ones." Something in Evelyn's chest tightened. Here was this child, the daughter of the man she was suing, offering help with such natural kindness. She glanced around nervously, but no one seemed to be paying attention to their interaction. "That would be nice," Evelyn said softly. Mia brightened and led her to the apple display. "See these red ones? If they're too soft, they'll go bad quick. You want them firm, like this," she demonstrated, pressing gently on an apple's skin. Evelyn found herself following the girl's lead, testing apples as directed. Her manicured nails looked stark against the fresh-picked fruit. "You know quite a lot about this," she said. "Daddy and I have a small orchard behind our house," Mia explained, carefully selecting another apple. "Just 6 trees, but they're special." "They were my mom's favorite." The mention of Mia's deceased mother made Evelyn's throat constrict. She'd known Jack Turner was a widower. It had been in the local papers. but hearing it mentioned so naturally by his daughter made it painfully real. "These look perfect," Mia declared, holding up 3 apples. "Oh, there's Daddy now." Evelyn's spine stiffened as she heard footsteps approach. Jack Turner stood a few feet away, wearing worn jeans and a faded blue t-shirt. His expression was carefully neutral, but his eyes held a wariness that made Evelyn want to shrink away. "Mia," he said quietly, "I see you've been helping Mrs. Grant." "She needed to know about the apples, Daddy," Mia explained earnestly. "I showed her just like you taught me." A ghost of a smile touched Jack's lips as he looked at his daughter. "That's kind of you, sweetheart." The moment stretched, awkward and heavy. Evelyn clutched her designer purse like a shield, while Jack's hand rested protectively on Mia's shoulder. "Mrs. Grant," Mia suddenly piped up, "are you coming to the church picnic tomorrow? Everyone's welcome. And Miss Ruth makes the best lemon squares in Tennessee." Evelyn blinked, caught off guard by the invitation. She looked at Jack, expecting him to make an excuse or gently redirect his daughter. Instead, he surprised her. "You'd be welcome," he said quietly. There was no enthusiasm in his voice, but no hostility either. Just a simple statement of fact. I'll think about it," Evelyn stammered. Mia beamed. "I hope you come. Maybe you can try my apple pie. Daddy's teaching me how to bake." Looking at the little girl's hopeful face, Evelyn felt something crack in her carefully maintained facade. This child, who had every reason to dislike her, was offering friendship without hesitation. "Thank you, Mia," she managed. "That's very sweet of you." Jack cleared his throat softly. "We should get going, sweetheart. Got those fence posts to fix at the Johnson place." "Okay, Daddy." Mia turned back to Evelyn. "Don't forget, tomorrow at 2 o'clock, the church has the big white steeple. You can't miss it." Evelyn watched them walk away, Mia's small hand in her father's larger one, her braids swinging with each step. She stood there long after they disappeared into the crowd, the forgotten apples still in her hands. Later that evening, Evelyn sat in her elegant living room, turning a glass of wine between her fingers. Sam looked up from his newspaper when she spoke. "I saw them today," she said quietly. "At the market. The Turner girl, Mia. She helped me pick apples." Sam set his paper aside, waiting patiently for her to continue. "She's just a child," Evelyn whispered, her voice catching. "And she has more grace than I do." Sam studied his wife's face, noting the shimmer of tears in her eyes. "Then maybe," he said gently, "it's time you start learning from her." Sunday dawned bright and clear over Maple Hollow's First Baptist Church. The late summer breeze carried the mouth-watering aroma of grilling hamburgers across. The churchyard, where checkered blankets dotted the grass and folding tables groaned under the weight of covered dishes. Jack Turner stood at the grill, spatula in hand, his weathered face peaceful as he flipped burgers with practiced ease. Mia darted between clusters of adults, her laughter mixing with other children's as they played tag around ancient oak trees. Her yellow sundress fluttered like butterfly wings, and her braids bounced with each step. Every few minutes, she'd glance toward her father, sharing a warm smile that spoke volumes of their bond. A hush fell over the gathering when Sam Grant's silver Mercedes pulled into the parking lot. Conversations stuttered to a stop, replaced by the buzz of whispers as Evelyn stepped out, wearing a modest blue dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. She clutched her purse like a shield, her knuckles white with tension. "Did she really come?" someone muttered. "After what she did to Jack?" Another voice added. "Bless her heart," came the signature Southern phrase that could mean anything from genuine sympathy to thinly veiled contempt. Sam placed a protective hand on his wife's back, guiding her toward the gathering. Evelyn's steps faltered as she noticed people turning away, pretending not to stare. The weight of judgment pressed down like the humid Tennessee air. "Welcome," Pastor Ruth's voice rang out clear and warm as she approached the Grants. Her silver hair caught the sunlight, and her arms opened wide in genuine welcome. "I'm so glad you could join us today." She embraced Evelyn without hesitation, as if the lawsuit didn't exist, as if grace were as natural as breathing. Evelyn's rigid posture softened slightly. "Thank you for having us," she managed. her voice barely above a whisper. "Come on." Pastor Ruth linked her arm through Evelyn's. "Mrs. Thompson's potato salad is legendary, and you simply must try Betty's peach cobbler." As they moved through the crowd, Pastor Ruth's presence seemed to thaw the ice. A few people nodded hello, and Sam fell into easy conversation with some of the men about local business matters. Evelyn found herself seated at a picnic table, a paper plate loaded with food before her. She picked at it absently, her attention drawn to Jack across the churchyard. He'd stepped away from the grill and was kneeling beside an elderly man in a wheelchair. The wheel had caught on a tree root, and Jack's strong hands worked carefully to fix the problem. His face showed nothing but patience and respect as he chatted with the older veteran, whose World War II cap sat proudly on his white hair. "That's Mr. Henderson," Pastor Ruth said softly, settling beside Evelyn. "Fought at Normandy. Jack visits him every week, helps with house repairs, takes him to appointments." She paused, letting the words sink in. "That's who Jack is, not just in emergencies, but every single day." Evelyn watched as Jack finished the repair, then clasped Mr. Henderson's hand with genuine warmth. Something twisted in her chest, a feeling she couldn't quite name. The afternoon light had turned golden when Mia gathered everyone around the steps of the church. She stood straight and tall, holding a simple frame in her small hands. Her voice carried clearly across the hushed crowd as she presented it to Pastor Ruth. "This is for the church," Mia said, "so people can remember what Daddy taught me about love." Pastor Ruth held up the framed essay, and Evelyn found herself moving closer, drawn by some force she didn't understand. The typed words were surrounded by hand-drawn hearts and stars. "Would you read it?" Mia asked, looking directly at Evelyn. The request stopped her breath. All eyes turned to her, but Mia's gaze held no judgment, only hope. With trembling fingers, Evelyn took the frame. Her voice cracked on the first words but grew stronger as she read. "Heroes aren't the ones who save lives. They're the ones who don't stop loving people who hurt them." The tears came without warning, sliding down her cheeks. She couldn't finish reading, but it didn't matter. The truth of those words, written by a child wise beyond her years, broke something loose inside her. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the churchyard, Evelyn found Jack alone by the now cold grill. People were packing up, saying goodbyes, but this moment couldn't wait. "Jack," she said softly. He turned, his expression open but guarded. "I don't deserve your kindness." Jack's response came without hesitation, gentle as a summer breeze. "You don't have to. We all get grace for free." 2 weeks after the church picnic, the Madison County Courthouse buzzed with tension. Morning light filtered through tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished wooden benches packed with spectators. Camera flashes popped like lightning as reporters jostled for position, their whispers echoing off the high ceiling. Jack Turner walked through the heavy double doors, his steps measured and calm. His navy suit, though clearly aged, had been carefully pressed. The worn fabric at the cuff spoke of years of special occasions, church services, parent-teacher conferences, and his wife's funeral. His military bearing showed in his straight spine and steady gaze. Across the aisle, Evelyn Grant sat rigid beside her legal team, her designer outfit a stark contrast to Jack's humble attire. She kept her eyes fixed on her folded hands, refusing to look up as he passed. Her husband Sam's hand rested supportively on her shoulder, his face etched with concern. In the front row, 10-year-old Mia perched between Pastor Ruth and Sheriff Donnelly. She clutched her essay in both hands, the paper already creased from countless readings. Pastor Ruth's arm wrapped protectively around the child's shoulders as they watched Jack take his place at the defendant's table. "All rise," the bailiff called out. Judge Martha Wilson swept in, her black robes rustling as she took her seat. Her keen eyes surveyed the packed courtroom before she nodded. "Be seated." The proceedings began with opening statements. Evelyn's lawyer painted a picture of trauma and reckless endangerment, his words sharp and calculated. Jack's court-appointed defender spoke simply about duty and human decency. When Jack took the stand, the room fell silent. His voice remained steady as he recounted that stormy afternoon. "I saw her car in the water," he said quietly. "Didn't think about anything except that someone needed help. That's all there was to it." "Did you consider the dangers?" Evelyn's lawyer pressed. "Yes, sir. But sometimes doing the right thing means taking risks." "And you felt qualified to make that decision?" Jack's eyes flickered briefly to his daughter. 20 years in the Army taught me that waiting for perfect conditions means people die. I saw someone's mother, someone's wife, in trouble. I acted. The prosecutor's attempts to rattle Jack fell flat against his humble certainty. He never raised his voice, never pointed fingers. When asked about the accusations and lawsuit, he simply said, "I believe Mrs. Grant was scared. Fear makes us do things we might regret later." Several reporters wiped their eyes. Even the judge seemed moved by his quiet dignity. When Evelyn took the stand, her carefully constructed facade began to crack. Her voice trembled as she described the terror of being trapped in her sinking car. But when questioned about her reasons for the lawsuit, something shifted in her expression. She paused, swallowing hard. "I was angry. So angry at everything. At the storm, at needing help, at being," her voice broke, "at being powerless, just like when my brother." She couldn't continue. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she struggled to maintain composure. The courtroom waited in sympathetic silence. "Mrs. Grant," Jack's lawyer asked gently, "was your anger really directed at Mr. Turner?" Evelyn looked at Jack for the first time that day. His eyes held no accusation, only compassion. She shook her head slowly. "No," she whispered. "It wasn't." During the recess, Sam found Evelyn in a quiet corridor. She stood at a window, arms wrapped tightly around herself. "Evie," he said softly, "you can stop this." She turned to him, mascara smudged beneath her eyes. "How? After everything I've done?" "By choosing grace," Sam replied, taking her hands in his. "Right now. That man in there, he chose grace when he jumped into that creek. He chose it again when he forgave you at the picnic. Now it's your turn." When court resumed, the tension had reached a fever pitch. Judge Wilson had barely settled into her chair when Evelyn suddenly rose to her feet. The room hushed. "Your Honor," she said, her voice shaking but clear, "I wish to withdraw my case." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. The judge leaned forward. "Mrs. Grant, are you certain?" "Yes, Your Honor." Evelyn's gaze found Jack again. "I was wrong. Mr. Turner is a hero, and I've done nothing but cause him pain. I withdraw all charges." Spontaneous applause erupted from the gallery. The judge rapped her gavel, but her eyes crinkled with approval. "Order! Order in the court!" At the defendant's table, Jack bowed his head. His shoulders sagged with relief as 28 days of stress melted away. Mia beamed through happy tears, her essay clutched triumphantly to her chest. Pastor Ruth raised her eyes heavenward in silent thanksgiving. Warm yellow light spilled from the windows of First Methodist Fellowship Hall into the deepening dusk. Paper lanterns and twinkling string lights crisscrossed overhead, casting a gentle glow over the impromptu celebration. The aroma of coffee and homemade cake mingled with the sound of gospel music floating from old speakers. "Come on, Daddy." Mia tugged at Jack's hand, her party dress twirling as she pulled him toward the makeshift dance floor. Her earlier tears of relief had given way to pure joy, her smile bright enough to light up the room on its own. Jack laughed, allowing himself to be led. "All right, sweetheart, but remember, your old man's got 2 left feet." The congregation had pulled together the celebration in record time. Church ladies had appeared with covered dishes and desserts, while deacons arranged chairs and strung lights. Even folks who rarely attended services showed up, drawn by the story of vindication that had spread through town like wildfire. Pastor Ruth stood by the punch bowl, beaming as she watched Jack and Mia sway to Amazing Grace. The father and daughter moved in small circles, Jack occasionally spinning Mia under his arm while she giggled. For a moment, the weight of the past weeks seemed to lift from his shoulders. "He looks happy," Sheriff Donnelly observed. joining Pastor Ruth with a paper plate of Mrs. Peterson's famous chocolate cake. First time I've seen him really smile since this whole mess started. The Lord works in mysterious ways, Pastor Ruth replied, nodding toward where Evelyn and Sam Grant stood quietly near the door. Sometimes it takes a storm to clear the air. The music shifted to an upbeat hymn, and more couples joined the dance floor. Mia convinced Jack to attempt a faster step, both of them laughing at his clumsy efforts. The string lights twinkled overhead like earthbound stars, and the fellowship hall thrummed with the warmth of community restored. Then, mid-spin, Jack stumbled. At first, Mia thought he was just being silly, but his face had gone ash-gray, and his hand pressed against his side. "Daddy?" "I'm okay, sweetheart," he managed, but his voice sounded strange and tight. "Just need to sit down for a—" He never finished the sentence. His knees buckled, and he crumpled to the floor with a heavy thud that cut through the music like a gunshot. "Daddy!" Mia's scream pierced the air. The music screeched to a halt. Sheriff Donnelly reached them first, kneeling beside Jack's still form. "Someone call 911. Pastor Ruth gathered a sobbing Mia into her arms as people scrambled to help. Sam Grant was already on his phone with emergency services, his voice clear and controlled as he gave directions to the church. "He's breathing, but his pulse is weak," the sheriff reported, 2 fingers pressed to Jack's neck. "Jack, can you hear me, buddy?" Jack's eyelids fluttered, but he didn't respond. A thin sheen of sweat covered his face, and his breathing came in short, labored gasps. "Make room! Give him air!" Pastor Ruth called out, trying to push back the crowd of worried onlookers. Someone had the presence of mind to turn off the music, leaving only the sound of frightened murmurs and Mia's continuing sobs. The wail of approaching sirens cut through the evening air. Within minutes, paramedics burst through the fellowship hall doors, equipment in hand. They worked quickly, checking vital signs and asking rapid-fire questions. Has he complained of any pain recently? Did he hit his head when he fell? Any previous medical conditions? Through her tears, Mia managed to tell them about the rescue, about how her daddy had been moving slower lately, wincing sometimes when he thought she wasn't looking. The paramedics exchanged glances. "Possible internal injuries," one muttered. "Could have been masked by adrenaline during the incident." They loaded Jack onto a stretcher, his face now covered by an oxygen mask. As they wheeled him out, Mia tried to follow, but Pastor Ruth held her back. "Let them do their work, child," she soothed. "We'll be right behind them." The celebration dissolved into chaos as people rushed to their cars, determined to follow the ambulance to Madison General. In the parking lot, Evelyn stood frozen, watching the emergency lights flash red and blue against the church's white walls. "All this time," she whispered, her voice breaking. "He was hurt all this time, and I just made it worse." Sam squeezed her shoulder. "This isn't how his story ends," he murmured. "Or yours." The emergency room waiting area filled quickly with concerned church members. Pastor Ruth sat with Mia, helping her call Jack's sister in Nashville. Sheriff Donnelly paced, making calls to ensure Jack's house would be looked after. Outside the ICU doors, Evelyn pressed her hands against the cool wall, guilt crushing her chest. The doctor's initial assessment echoed in her head. Internal bleeding, possible organ damage, complications from untreated injuries sustained during the rescue. Her rescue. Sam's steady hand came to rest on her shoulder, anchoring her as tears finally broke free. Through the window, she could see medical staff rushing around Jack's bed, their faces serious as monitors beeped urgent warnings. "He saved my life," she whispered, her voice raw. "And I nearly destroyed his." Fluorescent lights hummed softly in the sterile hospital room. The steady beep of monitors marked time, like a quiet metronome, keeping watch over Jack Turner's still form. His daughter Mia was curled up in a vinyl armchair, too big for her small frame, her fingers wrapped tightly around his old dog tags. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, evidence of a sleepless night. Pastor Ruth stood at the foot of the bed, her weathered hands clasped in prayer. Her gentle whispers barely disturbed the air. "Lord, wrap your healing arms around this good man." A few church members lined the walls, heads bowed in reverent silence. Morning sunlight filtered through half-drawn blinds, casting strips of gold across Jack's peaceful face. Various tubes and wires connected him to beeping machines, making him look smaller, somehow more vulnerable than the strong man who'd dove into raging waters just weeks ago. Dr. Martinez entered, his footsteps deliberately quiet. He carried a thick medical file and wore the careful expression of someone bearing difficult news. "Miss Ruth," he said softly, gesturing toward the hallway. "May I speak with you as Mia's temporary guardian, while Mr. Turner is indisposed?" Pastor Ruth squeezed Mia's shoulder before following the doctor out. Through the glass window, their serious faces told a story no one wanted to hear. "The internal injuries are worse than we initially thought," Dr. Martinez explained, his voice low but clear. "There's significant damage to his liver and kidney from the impact during the rescue. He needs surgery. Soon. The longer we wait, the more complicated it becomes." Pastor Ruth's face tightened. "The cost? Given the complexity and specialists required." The doctor hesitated. "We're looking at close to $200,000. From around the corner, Evelyn Grant stood frozen, having arrived just in time to hear the diagnosis. Her hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp. "His insurance?" Pastor Ruth asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "Basic coverage only," Dr. Martinez replied. "It won't come close to covering this." Evelyn's legs grew weak. She steadied herself against the wall, remembering the courthouse documents, how Jack had liquidated his savings account to cover legal fees from her lawsuit, her pointless, prideful lawsuit. "He spent everything," she whispered to herself, tears welling up. "Everything he had, because of me." Through the window, she watched Mia stir in her chair. The little girl blinked awake, immediately reaching for her father's hand. The sight broke something in Evelyn's heart. She fumbled for her phone, hands shaking as she dialed. "Sam?" Her voice cracked. "Sam, I need you here. Now." Within an hour, Sam Grant arrived, his usual polished appearance slightly rumpled from rushing over. He found Evelyn sitting in the hospital chapel, mascara streaked down her cheeks. "I did this," she choked out. "He saved my life, and I almost destroyed his. And now Mia might lose her father, because I was too proud to see what was right in front of me." Sam knelt beside her, his face grave but determined. He pulled out his phone and dialed. "James, it's Sam Grant. I need you to clear my morning and get to work on something urgent." He paused, looking at his wife. "Find a way to make this right." Back in Jack's room, Evelyn stood in the doorway, watching Mia read aloud from a worn storybook. The girl's voice wavered but stayed strong, just like her father would want. Pastor Ruth sat nearby, her presence a steady comfort in the sterile room. Evelyn moved quietly to sit beside Mia. The child looked up, and instead of the judgment or anger Evelyn expected, she saw only tired worry in those young eyes. "He's going to be okay," Mia said with childhood certainty.
"God doesn't let heroes die."
Evelyn's throat tightened. She reached out hesitantly, then wrapped an arm around Mia's small shoulders. "Your daddy saved my life," she whispered, voice thick with emotion. "Now it's my turn to save his." Mia leaned into the embrace, her father's dog tags clicking softly between them. The morning sun climbed higher, casting its light over both of them as machines continued their steady vigil over Jack Turner, the hero who had risked everything to save a stranger and somehow ended up saving them all. Sunlight streamed through the hospital window in golden ribbons, casting warm, shifting patterns across Jack's bed as clouds drifted overhead. His eyes fluttered open slowly, adjusting to the brightness after 2 days of fitful sleep punctuated by pain medication and worried dreams. The room gradually came into focus. Sterile white walls adorned with a single cheerful get-well card from Pastor Ruth. The steady rhythm of beeping machines monitoring his vital signs. And the familiar, sharp scent of antiseptic that seemed to permeate everything in this place of healing. Mia sat cross-legged on the edge of his bed, her math homework spread across her lap in neat piles. Her pencil moved carefully across the worksheet, her tongue poking out slightly in concentration, habit she'd inherited from him. When she noticed him stirring, her face lit up like a sunrise breaking through storm clouds.
Daddy, you're awake.
She carefully gathered her papers with the practiced efficiency of someone who had been managing this routine for days, trying not to disturb the tangle of IV lines that snaked from his arm to the hanging bags of fluid. "Hey, sweetheart." Jack's voice emerged rough and scratchy from disuse. His throat dried despite the ice chips the nurses had been giving him. He managed a weak smile, his hands slowly finding hers across the white hospital blanket. Her small fingers felt warm and real, an anchor to the world beyond this sterile room. "Have you been studying this whole time?" "Miss Peterson said I could do my schoolwork here," Mia explained, squeezing his fingers gently. Her voice carried the careful cheerfulness of a child trying to be brave for a parent. "Pastor Ruth brings me my assignments every morning, and the nurses let me use their break room table when you're sleeping. Mrs. Henderson from down the hall even helped me with my fractions yesterday." A soft knock interrupted their quiet conversation. Evelyn Grant stood hesitantly in the doorway, her husband Sam's steady, reassuring presence just behind her. Their faces carried a solemn weight, but there was something else in their expressions. Determination, perhaps, or the kind of hope that comes after making a difficult decision. "May we come in?" Evelyn asked quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Gone completely was the sharp, cutting edge that had colored every word during the lawsuit proceedings. Now she spoke with gentle hesitation, as if afraid of disturbing the fragile peace of the room or imposing on their private moment of recovery. Jack nodded slowly, wincing slightly as he tried to sit up straighter against his pillows. The movement sent a dull ache through his injured ribs, reminding him of the price his body had paid for that night's heroism. Mia immediately moved to help, adjusting the pillows behind him with movements that were both careful and practiced. She'd clearly been taking excellent care of him, this little girl who had somehow become his caretaker. Sam stepped forward deliberately, a crisp white envelope held carefully in his weathered hands. He cleared his throat, the sound echoing softly in the quiet room. "Jack, we've been doing a lot of thinking these past few days." His voice was steady and measured, but deep emotion flickered just beneath the surface like a flame behind glass. "About what happened to you, what we caused to happen, and it isn't right. None of it." "Sam, please." Jack started to protest, his innate humility making him uncomfortable with what felt like an apology he didn't need. But Sam held up a gentle but firm hand. "Let me finish, son. Please." The older man's eyes were earnest, almost pleading. "You didn't just save my wife's life that night in the storm. You showed us what real courage looks like, what true integrity means, what it is to put others before yourself without counting the cost." He extended the envelope with both hands, as if offering something sacred. "You didn't ask for anything in return, but you deserve everything we can give." Jack stared at the envelope, not immediately reaching for it. His pride, battered as it was, still struggled against accepting what felt like charity. "I can't take your pity," he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of a man who had learned to depend only on himself. "What I did that day, anyone would have done it. It was just the right thing to do." "But they didn't." Evelyn stepped forward, her voice trembling with emotion. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears that threatened to spill over at any moment. "You did. When it mattered most, when the stakes were highest, you chose to act. And this isn't pity, Jack. This is redemption." Her voice caught on the last word, the syllables thick with meaning. "Please, let us do this one right thing. Let us try to balance the scales." With trembling fingers that seemed to move of their own accord, Jack opened the envelope. The paper crinkled softly in the hospital's hushed atmosphere. His eyes widened dramatically as he read the check inside, the numbers seeming almost impossible to believe. The amount was far more than enough to cover his surgery and months of rehabilitation. It was more money than he'd seen in years. "The rest," Sam explained gently, watching Jack's reaction with careful attention, "is to start a veterans charity, in your name, with your values guiding it, to help other servicemen and women who need assistance, who've fallen through the cracks like you almost did. Jack's vision blurred as unexpected tears filled his eyes. He'd spent so many years being the strong one, for his country during long deployments, for Mia after Sarah's death, for everyone who needed him to be their rock. But in that moment, surrounded by grace he had never asked for and never expected, tears slipped silently down his weathered cheeks. "I don't know what to say," he whispered, his voice breaking slightly. The words felt inadequate for the overwhelming gratitude flooding his heart. "Say yes," Mia piped up from beside him, her young voice cutting through the emotional tension with perfect timing. Her suggestion made everyone in the room laugh softly, the sound warm and healing. "Please, Daddy, they want to help." Jack looked down at his daughter's hopeful face, seeing Sarah's eyes and smile reflected there, then back at the Grants standing before him. He saw no pity in their expressions, only sincere desire to make amends, to transform their guilt into something meaningful and lasting. Slowly, deliberately, he nodded. "Thank you," he managed, the words carrying the weight of everything he couldn't express. This means everything. "Thank you." Evelyn moved closer to the bed, her steps careful and reverent. Her hand found Mia's shoulder, resting there gently. For a long moment, she simply looked at the little girl who had shown more wisdom and compassion than all the adults combined, whose essay had opened hearts and changed minds across their entire community. Then, surprising everyone, including herself, she pulled Mia into a gentle, heartfelt hug. "You have your father's courage," Evelyn whispered into Mia's soft hair, breathing in the innocent scent of childhood, strawberry shampoo and pencil erasers, and pure hope. Mia hugged her back without any hesitation, her small arms wrapping around Evelyn with the generous spirit that had already touched so many lives. "You have it too," she replied softly, her voice muffled against Evelyn's shoulder. "You just forgot for a while. But that's okay. Sometimes grown-ups need reminding." A gentle autumn breeze rustled through the maple trees lining Main Street as crowds gathered outside the newly renovated Victorian building. Its fresh blue paint and gleaming white trim stood proudly against the cloudless Tennessee sky. A banner stretched across the wraparound porch read, "Turner's Hope Foundation for Veterans, Grand Opening." Jack Turner stood at the top of the steps, his Army uniform pressed and medals gleaming. Though still moving carefully from his surgery, his shoulders were straight and his eyes bright. Beside him, Mia bounced on her toes in a yellow sundress, her essay clutched to her chest like a precious treasure. The crowd hushed as Evelyn Grant approached the microphone. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice rang clear and strong across the square. "6 months ago, I was trapped in rising waters, certain I would die." She paused, meeting Jack's steady gaze. A stranger, a veteran, who had already given so much to his country, risked everything to save me. But kindness saved me twice that day, once from the water, her voice caught, and once from myself. Applause rippled through the crowd. Pastor Ruth dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief. Sam Grant stood at the back, a proud smile warming his usually reserved features. Jack stepped forward, scissors in hand. The red ribbon fluttered in the breeze. With a clean snip, he officially opened the doors to Turner's Hope. Cheers erupted as Mia hugged his waist, her face beaming with joy. Inside, the Foundation's mission came alive. The main room housed a veteran support center, its walls adorned with flags and photographs of service members. A corner was dedicated to Mia's viral essay, now professionally framed. Computer stations lined one wall for job searches, while comfortable chairs created conversation areas where veterans could find fellowship. Throughout the afternoon, Jack moved among the guests with quiet authority. He stopped to chat with a young Marine struggling with civilian life, sharing his own experiences of adjustment. The veteran's tense shoulders gradually relaxed as Jack listened, offering not just understanding, but practical help, job leads, counseling resources, and most importantly, hope. In another room, Mia had her own audience. Elementary school teachers and principals gathered to hear her read her essay, "The Day My Daddy Became a Hero." Her clear voice carried the simple truth of a child's wisdom. Heroes don't wear capes or fly through the sky. Sometimes they wear old army jackets and drive rusty trucks. Sometimes they dive into scary waters to save strangers. But the biggest heroes are the ones who keep being kind, even when people aren't kind back. Several teachers wiped away tears. One principal immediately scheduled her to speak at his school's assembly. Mia's words had touched something deep, a reminder that goodness still thrived in their small town. The Grants moved through the celebration quietly, declining attention, but their impact was everywhere. In the new computers, the furnished rooms, the fully stocked kitchen, their foundation funding ensured Turner's Hope would serve veterans for years to come. Sam had insisted their donations remain anonymous, understanding that true grace seeks no recognition. As afternoon mellowed into evening, the transformation in the town became apparent. Neighbors who had once whispered accusations now shared coffee and conversation. The courthouse secretary who had processed the lawsuit now volunteered to teach computer skills. Even the diner owner who had doubted Jack now provided free meals to veterans in need. The sun was setting when Jack finally slipped away from the celebration. He drove the familiar winding road to Riverside Cemetery, where late light painted the hills in gold. A bouquet of fresh daisies, Anna's favorites, brightened his hand. At his wife's grave, Jack knelt carefully, mindful of his healing body. He arranged the flowers with tender care, brushing leaves from the headstone. The marble was warm from the day's sun, just as Anna's smile had always warmed his heart. "We made it, Anna," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. The evening breeze carried the scent of autumn leaves and distant wood smoke. Grace won. He remained there as purple shadows lengthened across the grass, remembering Anna's constant faith and goodness. She would have loved seeing Mia shine today, would have celebrated how light had overcome darkness. In the end, it wasn't just about saving one woman from floodwaters. It was about the ripples of kindness spreading through their community, healing old wounds and building new bridges. A car door closed softly behind him. Small footsteps approached, and Mia's hand slipped into his. Together, father and daughter stood in the gentle dusk, their hearts full of gratitude for the mysterious ways grace worked in the world, through storms and struggles, through pain and forgiveness, through the simple courage of choosing love over bitterness again and again. Snow drifted lazily past the windows of Jack Turner's modest farmhouse, coating the world in pristine white. Inside, warmth radiated from the crackling fireplace as Jack and Mia worked together decorating their small Christmas tree. The 10-year-old girl carefully unwrapped tissue paper from a box of old ornaments, each one telling its own story. "This one was Mommy's favorite," Mia said softly, holding up a delicate glass angel with slightly tarnished wings. Jack's eyes grew tender as he helped her hang it on a prominent branch. "That's right, sweetheart. She always said angels watch over us." He adjusted the ornament until it caught the firelight. "And I believe she was right," the doorbell chimed, sending their old retriever Murphy into a flurry of excited barks. Through the frost-covered window, they could see Evelyn and Sam Grant on the porch, arms laden with packages and covered dishes. "Coming!" Mia called out, racing to open the door. A gust of cold air swept in along with the Grants, bringing the crisp scent of winter. "Merry Christmas Eve!" Sam boomed cheerfully, stamping snow from his boots. He carried a ham wrapped in foil and several brightly wrapped presents. Evelyn followed, her cheeks pink from the cold, holding a basket filled with fresh rolls and pies. The transformation in her was striking. Gone was the sharp edge of anger that had once defined her features. Now her smile reached her eyes, genuine and warm. "We thought we'd bring Christmas dinner a day early," she explained, setting down her offerings. "Sam's been cooking all day. More like I've been taste testing while you cooked," Sam corrected with a wink, making everyone laugh. Jack took their coats, hanging them by the fire to dry. "You didn't have to do all this," he said, but his voice held genuine appreciation. "We wanted to," Evelyn replied simply. She paused, taking in the modest decorations. Paper chains Mia had made at school, strings of popcorn, and well-loved ornaments. Her eyes softened. "It's beautiful in here." They gathered in the living room while the ham warmed in the oven. Mia showed Sam her collection of origami birds, teaching him how to fold paper cranes. The big man's fingers fumbled comically with the delicate paper, drawing giggles from everyone. Jack returned from the kitchen with steaming mugs of spiced cider, passing them around. The firelight danced across their faces as they settled into comfortable conversation. "I've been meaning to tell you both," Evelyn said during a quiet moment, her fingers wrapped around her mug. "I started seeing Dr. Matthews, the therapist in Cedar Grove. It's been transformative." Jack nodded encouragingly, and Sam squeezed her hand. "For the first time since losing my brother, I feel like I can breathe again." Her voice wavered slightly. "I carried that anger for so long, I forgot what it felt like to live without it. But now," she smiled, tears glinting in her eyes, "now I feel free." "We're proud of you, Evelyn," Jack said quietly. "Healing takes more courage than hiding." Mia, who had been listening intently, suddenly jumped up. "Oh, I almost forgot." She darted to the tree and retrieved a small package wrapped in newspaper comics. "I made this for you, Mrs. Grant." Evelyn carefully unwrapped the gift to reveal a handmade ornament, a clear glass ball filled with tiny paper boats and glitter. Written in Mia's careful hand were the words, "Hope floats." For a moment, Evelyn couldn't speak. She held the ornament as if it were made of precious gems, tears spilling freely now. "The boats are because of the water," Mia explained earnestly. "But they're not sinking, they're floating, like hope always does." Evelyn pulled the little girl into a tight hug. "It's perfect," she whispered. "Absolutely perfect." Sam cleared his throat, clearly moved himself. "I think this calls for a toast," he suggested. Jack nodded, raising his mug of cider. "To forgiveness," he said with quiet conviction. "The only thing that never runs dry." They all raised their glasses, smiling through tears as the snow continued to fall outside, turning their small corner of Tennessee into a winter wonderland. The cider glasses clinked together in the warm firelight, sealing a moment of grace none of them would ever forget. Note: I've stopped here as this fulfills all the beats requested in the instructions. The opening scene with decorating, and the Grants arriving with gifts. The main events of sharing time together, and Evelyn's therapy revelation, and the specific ending scene with Jack's toast. The scene is complete, as per the requirements. Springtime painted Maple Hollow in soft pastels. Cherry blossoms dotting the streets like pink confetti. At the Turner house, stacks of mail covered the kitchen table where Jack sat with his morning coffee, Mia beside him munching on toast. "Look at this one, sweetheart," Jack said, carefully opening another envelope. His fingers, still slightly stiff from the surgery, moved deliberately across the paper. "It's from a Marine in California." Mia scooted closer, her eyes bright with interest. Jack cleared his throat and read aloud. "Dear Mr. Turner, I lost faith in humanity after coming home from Afghanistan. But your story, how you helped someone who hurt you, it reminded me why I served in the first place. Thank you for showing me that good people still exist. Read another one, Daddy," Mia urged, reaching for one with a Colorado postmark. Jack smiled, watching his daughter's eager face. Every morning they shared this ritual, reading letters from strangers whose lives had somehow been touched by their story. Some wrote about their own struggles with forgiveness. Others shared stories of kindness they'd witnessed. But the ones that moved Jack most came from fellow veterans. The doorbell chimed, and Mia jumped up to answer it. Evelyn and Sam Grant stood on the porch, both carrying folders and wearing bright smiles. "Good morning, Jack," Evelyn said warmly as they entered. The awkwardness between them had melted like spring snow, replaced by a genuine friendship. "We've got exciting news about the fundraiser tour." Sam spread out a map on the table, careful not to disturb the letters. 20 cities in 2 months, he explained, tracing the route with his finger. "We've got veterans organizations in every stop asking to host events." Jack rubbed the back of his neck, looking uncertain. "I don't know about all this attention. I'm just a mechanic who did what anyone would do." "That's exactly why people want to hear from you," Evelyn insisted gently. "You're real, authentic, and your story," She paused, meeting his eyes. Well, I should know better than anyone how powerful it is. Mia bounced excitedly in her chair. Can I show them, Daddy, please? At Jack's nod, she ran to her room and returned with a glossy proof copy of her book. Daddy Saved the Day was printed in bold letters across the cover, with a beautiful illustration of a stormy creek and two silhouetted figures. The publisher sent it yesterday, Jack explained, his voice thick with pride. First copies hit stores next month. Sam picked up the book reverently. This is incredible, Mia. You're going to inspire so many children. And their parents, Evelyn added softly. They spent the morning planning the tour details. Jack would speak about forgiveness and healing. Mia would read from her book. The Grants would share their perspective on redemption. All proceeds would go to Turner's Hope Foundation, supporting veterans in need. Later that afternoon, Jack and Mia walked downtown to the foundation's office. Spring breeze carried the scent of blooming dogwoods as they passed familiar storefronts. Through windows, they could see Mia's book displayed prominently, local pride shining through. The sidewalks buzzed with activity. Outside the church, Pastor Ruth coordinated volunteers packing care packages for homeless veterans. The diner hosted a weekly support group. Even the high school had started a program where students wrote letters to deployed service members. Look, Daddy. Mia pointed to the library, where a group of children sat cross-legged around a teacher reading from a familiar book. Her book. Jack squeezed her hand. You know what makes me proudest? He asked. Not the book or the foundation or any of that. It's seeing how one small act of kindness created all this love. Mia looked thoughtful. Is that why you don't like being called a hero? Jack stopped walking, kneeling to meet her eyes. The best stories aren't about heroes, he said softly. They're about hearts that heal. About people choosing love over anger, forgiveness over pride. That's the real miracle. Not what I did, but what everyone else chose to do after. They continued their walk, passing more signs of the change that had swept through their town. The auto shop where Jack once worked now offered free repairs to veteran-owned vehicles. The coffee shop hosted weekly meetings for military spouses. Even the grumpy old man who owned the hardware store had hung a sign reading, "Veterans Welcome, Always." At the foundation office, they found several younger veterans meeting with job counselors. One man looked up as Jack entered, his eyes lighting with recognition. He stood, walking over with halting steps. "Sir," he said, extending his hand. "Your story. It gave me courage to ask for help. I start work next week." Jack shook his hand firmly. "The courage was always yours," he replied. "Sometimes we just need reminding." Mia watched from nearby as more veterans approached her father. Some wanted to shake his hand, others just wanted to share their stories. One younger woman, tears in her eyes, simply whispered, "Thank you," before hugging him tight. Through the office window, spring sunshine illuminated the scene. Townspeople helping each other, children reading stories of hope, and veterans finding their way home to themselves. Not through grand gestures or heroic acts, but through small moments of grace, quietly healing hearts that had forgotten how to trust. The early summer evening wrapped Maple Hollow's town square in a gentle warmth that seemed to embrace every soul who walked beneath the canopy of twinkling lights. Hundreds of tiny bulbs crisscrossed overhead like captured fireflies, casting a golden glow that made the whole square feel enchanted. 1 year had passed since the storm that changed everything, and now the annual Hope Festival buzzed with life and laughter that echoed off the old brick buildings surrounding the square. Jack Turner's weathered but strong hands worked steadily, his calloused fingers securing the final banner across the wooden booth with practiced precision. The surgery had healed him remarkably well, better than Dr. Matthews or anyone else at Maple Hollow General had dared to expect. His movements were fluid and sure, no trace of the pain that had nearly claimed his life. As he stepped back to admire his handiwork, a gentle breeze caught the edges of the banner, making it dance slightly in the warm air. The sign read, "Turner's Hope Foundation" in bold navy letters, with Mia's book cover displayed prominently below, a photograph of a little girl's hand clasped safely in her father's strong grip. "How's it look, Pumpkin?" he called to Mia, who sat behind a small folding table that Sam Grant had donated, carefully arranging copies of Daddy Saved the Day in neat, precise stacks. Her small hands moved with the same methodical care her father showed in everything he did. Perfect. Mia beamed, her fingers lovingly tracing the glossy cover of her published book. The photograph showed Jack lifting her high above his head, against a backdrop of Tennessee mountains, both of them laughing with pure joy. She'd grown nearly an inch taller over the past year, her legs now dangling properly from the adult-sized chair, but her eyes still held that same remarkable sparkle of wisdom that seemed far beyond her 11 years. A modest line had already formed at her table, mostly children clutching crumpled dollar bills, their parents hovering nearby with proud smiles, all eager to get their copies signed by Maple Hollow's youngest published author. The festival grounds hummed with the cheerful chaos of community celebration. Local vendors bustled around their booths, the sweet aroma of funnel cake and caramel apples mixing with the savory scents of barbecue and corn dogs. Mrs. Patterson from the diner had set up her famous lemonade stand, complete with hand-painted signs advertising the best sweet tea this side of Memphis. The high school marching band gathered near the white-painted gazebo, brass instruments catching and reflecting the golden light as they tuned their horns and adjusted their music stands. Teenagers in crisp blue uniforms laughed and joked, while their director, Mr. Chen, frantically shuffled through sheet music. Old Mr. Peterson from Peterson's Hardware moved with surprising agility for his 78 years, hanging colorful Japanese lanterns from every lamppost around the square. His grandson followed behind him, carrying boxes of battery-powered candles that would illuminate each lantern as darkness fell. Volunteers in matching Hope Festival t-shirts arranged folding chairs in neat, orderly rows before the main stage, where a banner reading 1 Year of Hope fluttered in the evening breeze. Pastor Ruth moved through the growing crowd like a gentle shepherd tending her flock, her silver hair catching the light as she stopped to greet everyone with warm, enveloping hugs that seemed to last exactly as long as each person needed. She paused to chat with elderly Mrs. Wilson about her arthritis, then seamlessly transitioned to helping young mother Sarah Mitchell wrangle her energetic 3-year-old son, who had escaped his stroller and was making a determined beeline toward the cotton candy machine. Pastor Ruth seemed to float effortlessly between groups, her presence weaving the diverse threads of the community together into something beautiful and whole. Near the old stone fountain that had anchored the town square for over a century, Evelyn Grant stood directing the careful placement of speakers and microphones with the same attention to detail she'd once applied to managing her brother's estate. But something fundamental had changed in her bearing over the past year. The rigid lines of anger and grief that had once defined her posture had softened, replaced by a quiet grace that seemed to emanate from somewhere deep within her soul. Her voice, when she spoke to the sound technicians, held none of the sharp edges that had once made people wince. She caught Jack's eye across the bustling square and waved, genuine warmth radiating from her smile like sunlight breaking through clouds after a long storm. Sam stood beside his wife, his strong arm wrapped protectively around her slender waist, his face glowing with a pride that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. He'd watched his wife transform from a woman consumed by bitterness into someone who actively sought ways to serve others, and the change still amazed him. When their eyes met, Evelyn leaned into his embrace, finding the kind of peace she'd thought was lost forever. As twilight began to paint the sky in shades of purple and rose, Pastor Ruth made her way to the stage with the unhurried confidence of someone who had delivered thousands of sermons to this same beloved community. The crowd gradually settled into their seats, conversations dying to respectful murmurs, then to a complete hush that seemed to hold anticipation and reverence in equal measure. The string lights overhead twinkled like earthbound stars, casting gentle shadows that danced across upturned faces. "My dear friends," Pastor Ruth began, her voice carrying clearly through the evening air without the need for amplification, reaching every corner of the square with the news. Same warmth that had comforted grieving families and celebrated joyous occasions for over 30 years. 1 year ago, our community witnessed something truly remarkable. Not just a physical rescue, though that was certainly miraculous enough, but a rescue of the human spirit that touched lives far beyond what any of us could have imagined. She paused, her wise eyes scanning the crowd, taking in the faces she'd known since childhood, the families she'd baptized, married, and sometimes buried. We saw how a single act of selfless courage sparked a chain reaction of healing that reached not just every heart in Maple Hollow, but countless hearts across our great nation through Mia's beautiful words. Jack stood at the very back of the crowd, one calloused hand resting gently on Mia's narrow shoulder, his other arm crossed over his chest, in the unconscious stance of a man who had spent years standing at attention. He'd never been comfortable being the center of attention, preferring to let his actions speak louder than any words ever could, but he'd learned over the past year to accept the community's gratitude with the same quiet grace with which he approached everything else in life. Redemption, Pastor Ruth continued, her voice gaining strength as she warmed to her theme, isn't simply about being saved from something terrible. True redemption is about allowing that salvation to transform us completely, to make us into the people God always intended us to be. We've witnessed that profound transformation in so many beautiful ways this past year, through our expanded veteran outreach programs, through Mia's inspiring book that has touched children around the world, through countless daily acts of kindness inspired by one man's choice to respond to hatred with love. The crowd stirred with emotion as Pastor Ruth's words settled into their hearts. Parents pulled their children closer, veterans straightened their shoulders with renewed pride, and teenagers who had initially rolled their eyes at another adult speech found themselves hanging on every word. Evelyn stepped onto the wooden stage next, her hands carefully cradling a beautifully crafted wooden plaque that Sam had commissioned from a local artisan. Her fingers trembled slightly as she accepted the microphone from Pastor Ruth. Not from nervousness, but from the overwhelming gratitude that still caught her off guard at unexpected moments. Jack Turner. She called, her voice steady but thick with the kind of emotion that comes from a heart completely transformed. "Would you please join me up here?" Jack squeezed Mia's shoulder reassuringly before making his way through the parting crowd toward the stage. His worn work boots made hollow rhythmic sounds on the wooden steps that Mr. Peterson had built with his own hands 40 years earlier. The thunderous applause that erupted from the crowd washed over him like a warm wave, filled with the genuine affection of people who had watched him quietly serve their community for years before he became a local hero. "This man," Evelyn said, turning to face Jack directly while addressing the crowd, her voice growing stronger with each word, as she spoke the truth that had taken her months to fully understand, taught me that true strength isn't found in pride, power, or the ability to control others. Real strength, the kind that changes the world, is found in the decision to forgive when forgiveness seems impossible. She held his gaze steadily, no longer the angry, broken woman who had once tried to destroy him. "You didn't just save my life that terrible night, Jack Turner. You saved my soul, my marriage, and my faith in humanity itself. You showed me what it means to love your enemies, and in doing so, you helped me discover that I didn't have to be my own enemy anymore." With both hands, she presented him with the plaque, its polished surface reflecting the twinkling lights above. Engraved in elegant script that caught the light were the words, "For proving that true strength lies in forgiveness, and true heroism lies in everyday kindness." Below that, in smaller letters, Turner's Hope Foundation. Founded 2023. Changing lives. One act of love at a time. The high school band struck up a gentle, flowing melody that seemed to float on the evening breeze, as dozens of paper lanterns began rising into the darkening sky like ascending prayers. Each lantern carried a small card with someone's hope or gratitude written in careful handwriting, creating a constellation of human dreams against the deepening twilight. Jack stepped down from the stage and found Mia in the crowd, her face glowing with pride and joy as she watched her father being celebrated by their entire community. He held out his work-roughened hand with a playful bow that made her giggle with delight. "May I have this dance, Miss Turner?" Mia's laughter tinkled like silver bells as she took his hand and let him lead her to the center of the square, where other couples had begun to move together in time with the music. Jack lifted his daughter onto his feet like he used to when she was much smaller, and they swayed together to the lilting melody, her small arms wrapped around his waist, her head resting against his chest where she could hear the steady, strong beat of his heart. The circle gradually expanded as other families joined them on the impromptu dance floor. Sam and Evelyn moved together with the grace of a couple who had rediscovered their love for each other, her head on his shoulder, his hand gentle on her back. Pastor Ruth danced with her teenage grandson, who had driven down from Nashville just for the festival. Mr. Peterson surprised everyone by asking the widowed librarian, Mrs. Chen, to dance, their steps careful but joyful. Dozens of townspeople moved in time to the music, young and old, rich and poor, all united in celebration of the hope that had been reborn in their community. The night air, filled with the intoxicating sweetness of magnolia blossoms from the ancient trees that bordered the square, mixing with the cheerful sounds of happy chatter, children's laughter, and the gentle shuffle of dancing feet on the worn brick pavement that had witnessed generations of Maple Hollow celebrations. The first firework burst overhead in a magnificent shower of gold, sparks that scattered like falling stars, followed immediately by explosions of red, blue, and green that painted the faces of the dancing crowd in brilliant, ever-changing colors. Jack paused in his gentle swaying, tilting his head back to watch the spectacular display that lit up the entire sky above their small Tennessee town. "Thank you, Lord," he whispered so softly that only Mia could hear him, his voice filled with the kind of deep gratitude that comes from a man who has truly understood how blessed he is. "Thank you for showing me that sometimes the greatest victories come disguised as the deepest struggles." Mia tightened her arms around his waist, pressing her face into his chest and breathing in the familiar scent of motor oil and aftershave that always meant safety and home to her. She pulled back just enough to look up at him with shining eyes that reflected the fireworks overhead. "You saved her, Daddy," she said with the simple wisdom that had made her book touch hearts around the world. "But she saved us too. She helped us remember that miracles can happen when people choose love instead of anger." The fireworks reached their crescendo, painting the entire sky in brilliant cascades of red, blue, green, and gold that seemed to dance in celebration of everything good and hopeful in the human spirit. Above them all, the eternal stars twinkled unchanged, silent witnesses to the extraordinary power of forgiveness, redemption, and love in a small Tennessee town called Maple Hollow, where one man's choice to save a stranger had created ripples of hope that would continue spreading long. After the last firework faded, and the last lantern disappeared into the infinite darkness of a summer night, what would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Jack Turner, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.